Hi guys, this is ShawNshawN. Welcome to my channel. I do eBay specials as well as I sell art on my website, ShawNshawN.co. Today I'm going to review Mortal Engines. So Mortal Engines is this movie based on 7 books. There's first 4 in a row, and then the author went and did 3 prequels. So in this first movie, there's kind of this huge global war that happens. So basically there's earthquakes and all kind of stuff around the world. So all the cities were shaken and destroyed. So the only way to survive the earthquakes was to build mobile cities in kind of tanks. So the premise is kind of silly to me, but it's fun, right? You just have to roll with it. It's basically kind of juvenile in that mentality, but it's fun. The tech is somewhat similar to Brazil, if you guys remember Brazil, with these really quirky pseudo-futuristic but pseudo from the past mix, and this has the same elements where it's a lot of feel of like Brazil mixed in, but it's not as French as in the plot. Brazil was just a circular plot, you didn't know what the heck was going on. This, it's a very linear Hollywood plot, makes sense. It's only the kind of the decoration that's Brazil looking. And so you have these different types of cities that are moving around and they're attacking each other for resources. As well as on the other hand, there's actually a floating city. There's these secret vehicles that hide from the big roving cities by hiding and looking like rocks. Another thing is there's these cities that you find out in that later half, Act 3, behind this huge wall. There's this land cities who have been forced to move, so they actually live on the land, which is the only kind of cities that make sense, right? Anyway, so those are the kind of 3 cities. So the plot kind of starts with this guy Tom Natsworthy, and he works in the Museum of London inside this huge moving kind of tank city called London. And he works in the Museum of History. So he's a historian. His parents were historians. They were killed off early on. And so he's meeting with, he's going to inspect one of the cities that were just captured, and they're stripping the city down to nothing but resources. And he finds some old tech, and then he hands it off to the director, Valentine. Now Valentine, there's a girl that stows away on the ship, Hester. Now Hester has come to kill Valentine, the leader, basically the second in command of London, this moving city tank. So she tries to kill him and Tom stops her. Then he chases her. She escapes through this chute out the back of the engine, and he thinks she committed suicide. He doesn't know where she's going. And then Valentine starts asking, "Hey Tom, what did you see? What did you see?" "Oh, he told me these crazy stories about you, da 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 da." And he's like, "Oh really?" And then boom, pushes him out the door. So Tom was becoming a problem for Valentine. So basically that's kind of Act 1. Act 2 is, the adventures back and forth between Tom Natsworth and Hester Shaw. And so they have these adventures, he's trying to get back to London, she's trying to get away. And then at the same time, Valentine hires this kind of robot killer that's after Hester. So he's like, "Oh, I'll let her loose and it'll solve my problems." So he lets this crazy robot thing, it's kind of a cyborg, human turned cyborg. And so part of the story is them getting chased by the cyborg. They resolve this. Then they turn back to London. They finally get to London. Valentine has created this crazy weapon from this old tech. There's a final scene. Basically, that wraps up the story. I thought pretty much the actors were pretty solid. You just have to kind of accept this weird technology that doesn't make any sense. It is based on 7 books, like I said, so that kind of lays it out so they have a lot of depth to the characters. And each one of the characters, all the kids, they have like, the sad story. Their parents died for some tragedy, which all of us can relate to, but normally in books they kind of don't have such a sad story, I think. Ways I think they could have improved it. I mean, there was a few characters that are killed off in the series, and I think probably in the book you really feel them. But in the movie, because they're introduced so rapidly, when they die, you're just like, okay, whatever, another side character died, right? I think if they had developed more of a connection with some of these side characters in the movie, you would have felt more like, oh, really tragic. Kind of like in Star Wars scene where everyone's fighting the final battle in New Hope, all of Luke Skywalker's friends are being shot down and killed, and they have kind of a connection there, so you kind of get the real drasticness of the situation. And we have a similar scenario in this movie where all the side characters killed off, the 2 main characters survive. So it has kind of this nice balance. And the bad guy is, he's pretty bad, but he's also looking for a solution for his people. He's just more radical. And the old guard is kind of hanging on to like, just eat cities, that's all we need to do. And he's like, forget that, we're running out of cities to eat. You have this weird concept of city tanks, cities on tanks basically, and eat other cities, which, again, it's kind of a really big leaping stone. It probably makes sense in the book. It just seems kind of loopy in a movie. One of the things fans of the books weren't happy where it was of Hester Shaw. She has kind of a scar that goes down her face. In the movie, it's kind of like, it's a jagged scar, but it's not too bad. In the book, it's kind of like goes right through her eye, and it really disfigures her. So of course, when they make the movie, you can't use this hugely disfigured girl. There's going to be no attraction to the girl, right? People are just kind of, you know, especially if young kids are seeing this as like PG-13, so they're aiming for a young demographic. So the girl's still got to look good. She has to have the scar, but not as disfigured. So I get that from a practical standpoint. Just she has to retain her beauty to be attractive, especially for Tom to fall in love with her over time. The character Hugo Weaving, you know, as Valentine, I thought was pretty good. There are some kind of twists and turns to his character, but he always seems kind of hell-bent, you know, villainous. He does have a little bit of a good side. Maybe they could have reversed part of the good side where they show Hester's mother and him were together early on. Maybe they should have showed that a little bit earlier. You know, maybe flip a part of in the editing, change it up a little bit, but you know, basically it is what it is. They kind of follow the book exactly how they possible. So in the book it works, and then they kind of stuck close to the book as possible, I think. You know, very true to the book. One of the things that, just off first glance before I read about there's this book series, is it comes off kind of like a propaganda film. You're thinking, oh, this is a Chinese company producing this because there's one Chinese star. Do you really need to have a Chinese star in the movie when the rest of the actors are kind of European or American? And I don't care. The only reason it seems like propaganda is in the end they go and attack this Chinese city behind the wall, and then the Chinese city, after they're attacked, you know, half the city blows up. They're like, oh, we welcome him in London. You're like, come on, dude. You're not going to assassinate all these people. You would have read them up and just shot them down, right? So very unlikely, kind of realistic absence of war. You'd probably be really, I don't know, you might throw in the towel and just be like, whatever, but you probably want to seek some vengeance first. So maybe that's a little bit unrealistic, but it's a movie, so they kind of softball that. The other thing that was really funny is this massive machine that's kind of, it's basically a nuclear weapon, but it's some other version, like a laser gun machine. And there's a dead switch, and the dead switch is Medusa, but if you take it apart, the other half is USA, so you stick USA in Medusa, and that stops the machine. So it's like basically saying like, US can stop the nuclear global war against China, but only USA can stop it, right? You know, and London's the driver, which doesn't make any sense. So it's this really kind of quirky, you feel like they're trying to make a commentary on the Trump-China showdown with this movie. I'm not sure if they did, or it just happens to be, I don't know, it's hard to say what came first. The book was written that way, and then it related to the Trump-China situation, or the book was immediately followed. Obviously, they wrote the book years ago, so they found a book that kind of fits the era, you know, similar to how Handmaid's Tale was written in the 80s, but actually really relates to kind of Trump administration. So this is kind of a funny tactic, or this kind of story really relates to the Trump administration, which is usually a good way to kind of sell the movie. You know, you want to fit the times you're selling it in, so that is appropriate. I think though that kind of the feel that it's a propaganda movie is gonna maybe fall short, even though it really isn't. If you look, I looked at all the producers, there's no Chinese production company. I know they're trying to sell it to China, so they'll probably have more of the character Chinese will be shown when they do the Chinese version. You know, what are you gonna do? You gotta sell the movie, right? So I guess that kind of makes sense, but we'll see, you know. Overall, I think it's a pretty fun movie. I don't know if it's gonna be a box office success. I mean, it's a new movie, so I was glad to see it for that aspect. But yeah, it's fun. I think it's just one of those movies where the logic doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's still a fun movie to see. So hopefully you guys like it. Give me a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks, guys.